Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk, where you'll hear from successful women who are empowering other women with their stories of adversity, resiliency, and success. And here is your host, Vicki Bradley, founder and CEO of Women in Leadership Empowered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Wow. Oh, wow. I have such an amazing guest here today. I am so excited to introduce everyone to this amazing young lady who is doing some kick butt work. I'm going to watch my swear words today. So let me thank Angela Gill Nelms for joining us all the way from Georgia. Angela, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, I am super excited to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you, and audience, we're thrilled to have you joining us today. We know you have a choice, and we're super excited that you're going to be here. I know we have a lively conversation planned for you today. And I'll just share, I was on Angela's podcast not too long ago, and we don't know how to stop talking. So
we don't. We realized that both of us could talk to anyone. And that means that we can talk to each other for an extended period of time.
For a really long time. And we've already decided that if we lived in the same area, we would be super fast friends. And we are now friends, even though we live in two different countries. That's all good. So, having friends all over the world is a good thing. But
Absolutely.
let me give you a little bit of feedback about Angela. I might call her Ange just because that more personalizes it. But it is Angela Gill Nelms. And so, Angela, thank you for being here. You are the CEO of the AGN Group, and you're an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and a motivational speaker known for founding and hosting several podcasts, including the Badass Leaders podcast. Okay, swear word, as well as your work in scaling startups across diverse industries, including healthcare and technology. You have this distinguished track record as a business leader. You've served as CEO and co-founder at a number of different organizations, which we'll get into in a minute. But you're also heavily involved with your alma mater, Georgia Tech University, and you're an advisor on their board. This woman has won numerous awards. I can't even go into them all, but just know when you go to check Angela out and connect with her on social media, you're going to know that she's Atlanta's one of the top fastest growing private companies, Inc.'s 500 fastest growing companies, and just the list goes on and on and on. So we are honored to have you here today. So thank you so much for carving out time and just joining us to share your story. And you have quite the story.
Well, thanks for having me. And I will say it's funny when we think about the word badass. And I was also, when I was thinking about my podcast, I was really nervous about putting that at the beginning of the podcast because I work with a lot of high-powered executives. And really, in order to be on the podcast, you've been in a role for a long period of time and you're well thought of in your industry. And so I do want to call out from my perspective, what that word means. And it really means that you really are reaching and striving to be the absolute best you can be. And I believe strongly that every individual, team, and company can and should strive to be their absolute best.
Yes.
And if we're brave enough to do that, then we can reach that. And that's what the podcast is. That's what my personal motto is. And to me, that is what that word really strives to teach to the world and to bring to the world.
Well, I love it. And I think that's great. And I know you've already had so many amazing guests on your show. And I was honored to be a participant on the show. So thank you for that. I love the badass language, honestly. And one of my dear friends who just turned 80 in November, her motto, she has an emoji on a motorcycle and it says badass. And I love it. She is.
The beginning of the podcast was, and it still is, brave hearts, brave conversations, badass leaders. And my executive coach said, Angela, everyone looks at you and they think badass. Just own it.
Exactly.
And so now we're like, that's what we are. So yeah.
Love it.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to have some conversations with you today.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. So let's jump in. Let's talk a little bit about, where you are today. I mean, you're this fierce entrepreneur. You're doing all these different startups. both in healthcare and technology, not an easy climate to be in. One is difficult enough, but adding the two together, I mean, there's so many advancements that are taking place. But look, like, talk to us about how did you decide that's the route you wanted to go in?
Oh, wow. That is a really great question. I'm pausing for a moment because it's such a deep question. I will say right now, I actually just started a position at an organization, a philanthropic organization called Biolocity, which is funded out of both Georgia Tech and Emory through the Department of Biomedical Engineering. I am what I would say a graduate of the Department of Biomedical Engineering from Georgia Tech. Biolocity is funded out of both of those programs. And what we do is we fund early stage technology that has a potential to be commercialized into patient care. And I am super stoked. So I do that. I also run the AGN group, which really strives to help individuals, teams, and organizations reach their absolute best through keynote speaking, through branding, and through all of that. And so to get back to your original question was, how did I get into this? Well, part of it was, when I was a very young kid, I either wanted to be a teacher or a doctor. I loved throughout, even as in elementary, middle, and high school, I loved giving back to the world. I served on many mission trips. I've always been service minded. I always liked the idea of, first off, I did not like the idea of being an engineer. So when the Air Force initially said, we're going to give you a scholarship to be an engineer, I was like, absolutely not. I'm not going to be an engineer. Engineers, they have pocket protectors. They have that tape on their glasses. I literally petitioned to the Air Force to change my scholarship so that I could eventually go to med school instead of being an engineer. And then when they said, okay, fine, we'll do it. Then my first year of college, I dropped my scholarship because I wasn't sure I wanted to be a doctor either.
Oh,
talk about someone who's like, I don't know what I want to do. So if you're 19, you don't know what you want to do, it's okay. Because at
Very
49,
normal.
I pivoted a lot in my life and became very successful regardless. So but I had a few things in my heart and in my soul that has really been consistent throughout my life. And some of those were a heart of service, a heart of improving the human condition, improving that in society and in healthcare. And despite my desire to not be an engineer, I've had this engineering brain. And so when you put this together, this desire to serve, improve the human condition, and an engineering brain, they naturally fit in healthcare and technology. Now, I literally fell into the technology space because I was working at the time at Emory Healthcare, and the founders of Florence Healthcare came to me. Actually, they didn't come to me. They came to a colleague, and they had this software product, and they were looking for someone to beta test it. And so they came to a colleague, and she said, oh, you should talk to Angela. She's the real techie one around here. Now, mind you, I was the research coordinator at Emory running the micro clinical trial for Medtronic, which was this implantable, super tiny pacemaker. And I was way too busy for some software product that these people thought was a good idea. And they came to me and said, hey, will you look at our beta product? And I said, absolutely not. I don't have time for you. And so Ryan Jones said, well, you have to eat lunch. I'll bring you lunch. So if you're an entrepreneur, hey, guess what? Food works for more people than just college students. It also works for busy professionals. So he brought me lunch, and I looked at his product. And a lot of what I also do in coaching is just to tell people to be your authentic self. So in my authentic Ange self, I said, hey, here's the deal. What you've built will not work. But the good news is there's a huge need for advancement in clinical research. And if you can instead do these things, I'm about to go work as head of product for this medical device company out in Silicon Valley. I'll test it. And he said, oh, come work for us instead. And I laughed because I was like, I know nothing about software, which is another point. I do a lot of coaching for people and say, hey, just because what you think your skill set is doesn't naturally align with something doesn't mean you're not a good fit for there.
Yeah.
It means that you actually may bring the exact skills they need, which is what happened. I said, okay, I know nothing about software, which now I know a lot about software. But back then in 2015, I knew nothing about software. I can't believe that was 10 years ago almost. Anyway, I knew nothing about software, but I knew a couple of things. I knew I loved advancing the human condition. I wanted to work in health, continue working in healthcare. I knew I wanted to build a company that provided white glove customer service. And I knew I wanted to be a part of building companies that employees loved to work at. And this was an opportunity to do that. And I've really continued that as my trend in all of the companies I've worked in. That's been my calling card. And now those are the three keys that I do in the AGN group. You know, I might not work when I'm working with my customers at the AGN group, they may not be in healthcare. That's no longer a requirement to me because the human condition is in all areas of life.
Yeah.
But providing excellent customer service, providing cultures and environments that people love and thrive in, that's in all areas of life, and helping people be and live their best lives or in all areas of life. And then in my new role in Biolocity, and helping advancing these early stage technologies and helping the ones that can actually commercialize and actually help patients, and these startups, and saying, hey, you should consider who your co-founders should be. You should consider who's on your board. And not all money from VCs is good money.
That's
all of
right.
these things is really amazing.
Wow. Okay. You said so many things there. So from an audience perspective, one thing I really, really want to key into is the fact that when you said, oh, the Air Force came to me and was like, oh, engineering scholarship, I'm not interested in that. Oh, I don't know if I'm interested. You talked them into giving you a medical, and then you decided no, and that's okay. So we have so many people that listen to this, and whether you're in your early stages of defining what your career might look like, or you're in later stages, it's recognizing you're getting clues all the time as to how you might end up. And I love what you've talked about, like those core values of service, right? That was really important to you, advancing humanity, you know, being able to help people from a medical perspective. So you've been able to take all the values and the things that are super important to you and create, by the way, a destiny that has become a reality for you. And maybe you weren't the most educated on technology at that moment, but you did understand service. You understood that we have a need in the world. And so you weren't afraid to support and go after fixing a problem that needed to be fixed. So I love that, because we get put into the box, and then we're like, oh, I can never leave the box. Yes, people, you can leave the box. And please do leave the box, right? Because you have uniqueness, you have gifts that you need to share with the world. And, you know, Angie's doing this in different ways. And I want to come into the culture, the teams, like having those dynamic places. We're going to come to that in a little bit. But there's also more to you than Biolocity, coaching, all the things that you're doing, because you do have your hands in a lot of different things, which is hugely powerful. But I also know that, you know, you're a single mom, and your path was not a straight line. It's definitely been a zigzag. You know, you've raised a daughter with special needs. So how have you managed to, you know, raise her, care for her, and also continuing to thrive in your own career?
That is a great question. One is, yes, you know, I will say this in going back in my life, you know, I was born to very abusive parents, sadly. And so one struggle I had, so we go back, sorry, my eye is itching. I have to say a side note. I was watching a podcast recently, and they were debunking some of the things that you think of like, if the person looks to the left, they're not necessarily lying, or these things are not necessarily lying. And I was like, my eye's itching. If I scratch my eye, are people going to read that as something? Okay. Side note, sidebar.
Don't
Okay,
read into it, audience.
back on track. Okay. Anyways, I was born in a family with very abusive parents. And as I was growing up, I was like, I do not want to be a mother. Okay. And then when I got into college, I thought, I really want to be a mother. That's why I gave up my scholarship, because I wasn't sure I could be a good mother and be a doctor at the same time. Okay. And so then when I met my daughter's dad, we started trying to have children, and suddenly we could not get pregnant. And let me tell you how many nights I had all of these arguments with God. I'm a very strong Christian. And I was just like, God, are you kidding me? Like, my mom had all these kids and she never should have had kids. Why can I not have kids?
Oh.
Right. And I finally got pregnant, and my first child was stillborn. And it was so horrible. And then my second child was born with a severe brain disorder. And that was, had a lot to do with why her dad and I divorced. And so when she was 2 years old, I made the decision that I was going back to school to get my engineering degree at Georgia Tech with a special needs 2-year-old, because that's what people do, right?
Of course.
And
well done.
like, so many people said to me, people said when I dropped my scholarship to begin with, they were like, you'll never graduate from college. And they were wrong. And when I went back to school with my special needs daughter to Georgia Tech, they were like, you will never graduate. And they were wrong. I graduated with highest honors.
Bravo.
Was president of BMES. I was on the student advisory board. I won a lot of awards. I interviewed for 3 jobs, and I got all 3 of the jobs.
Amazing.
And it was hard. And I think the reality is that I also was very determined. And one thing that I have always been able to do is just continue to make the next best decision that I could make. Now, I've made a lot of really poor decisions in life. I have a lot of failed relationships and a lot of things I look back at, and I'm like, not really sure why I made that decision. However, I haven't sat in that and really lived in that memory of the poor decision for too long. I've gotten up and said, okay, what am I going to do next? And I'm going to focus on today, and I'm going to do the best I absolutely can today. And for my daughter, for her, what I did is I was just like, when I was at school at Georgia Tech, she was having physical, speech, and occupational therapy 3 times a week. And so I often wasn't working on my homework or my projects until she went to bed at 8 or 9 at night. And I was doing research in a lab in order to make additional money. I floated most of my education on credit cards, from one credit card to the next. So when I came out of school, I had $80,000 or $90,000 worth of credit card debt that I had to pay off to do it. So I did what I had to do to get done what I had to get done. And I pushed her as much as I could to get done what she needed to get done. And I loved her as much as I could. Now, I am a mother, and I've never met a mother who didn't say, I wish I had loved my child more, or I wish I had provided more research. I wish I had, etc. Right? I still fall into those categories. So there are still days I think I could have done this better or whatnot. But I'm also, just like I said a moment ago, I'm not living in those moments of regret. I'm moving forward and just continually trying to do the best that I can, and continue to be a good role model to her, and continuing to say the thing, like say I love you, and live that life for her. So that's what I did then, was continue to role model, love, and support the best way that I, Ange, could do for her.
I love it. I love it. And what a way to demonstrate your leadership. right? Like that resilience, that determination, showing her that life hands you certain things and you have to make choices. And you made choices, some that taught you valuable lessons, some that gave you great opportunities, right? That you worked hard for. And so you've actually modeled for her some incredible leadership in how to navigate the world, because the world is not all rainbow and sunshine. So excuse me, I got all choked up on that one. You honestly, like, you have really demonstrated for her the importance of that resiliency, that determination. Excuse me. I know it's contagious. Oh my gosh.
You know what a funny thing is that Rihanna said? So Georgia Tech did an article on us, and Rihanna told me after she graduated high school, she told me she didn't have to go to college because she already went to Georgia Tech because she was there while I was there. And she went to study halls, and we lived in graduate and family housing. And I was like, that doesn't really count. Just like, you
See how smart she is? Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. And I love the fact that you've been this incredible role model for her and showing her the strength, right? And so often we forget how important being a mother. It's not about saying, I love you all the time. It is about modeling. You've demonstrated to her that strength that's so important to help her be successful in whatever she decides as she navigates this world. So kudos to you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. And I'm sure that, it was probably hard for her, but she didn't know any differently. So she's thinking, oh, this is cool. I'm around all these like grownups all the time.
She loved it.
Yeah.
She literally loved it.
Well, I can see why she would. Okay. So I'm going to digress just a little bit because I know a topic that's really important to you is, about team cultures and about authenticity, but also why conflict is so important. And so I think given our world, right now, there is a lot of conflict that's in the air. And so I just wanted us to talk about that and why your perspective is more focused on it enabling growth. So let's talk about conflict.
I love this. Yes, you've seen I've done several episodes and a blog post recently on conflict leading to cohesion. I should ponder where the root of this comes from. And I really think as I am pondering this, that the heart of this may come from. So, okay, I'm thinking out loud because I wasn't expecting this question. So let me just dig into this out loud.
Yeah, let's just brainstorm it.
I remember when I was at Florence at one point, I remember Ryan saying to me, because I love the book Radical Candor. Mm-hmm. And we had an executive coach come in and he said to me, he was like, you are the most radical candor person I know. And I was like, that is the greatest compliment.
Yes, thank you.
Right? Thank you. I'm going to put that as a badge of honor. Right. And so, but as you're just asking me that question, I'm thinking, I really think this ties back to, as a child, I wasn't ever allowed to speak up. And I often saw when I think about it, when we don't allow individuals to speak up, we're missing a piece of the conversation. So it's like you throw out a puzzle and you take away a few pieces and you put that puzzle together, but there are a few missing pieces so you never have the beautiful puzzle.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating to see a puzzle with a few missing pieces.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think of that if we don't allow conflict, it's the same thing as removing a few of those pieces. We never see the whole picture. We think we do because we're all getting along or we're all saying the same thing, but we're not because we've hidden away a few of the pieces that are super paramount to the whole picture.
Yeah.
And so the reason I love conflict is when we have conflict, when we allow healthy conflict, and there's a difference. So when I say I love conflict, I am not saying I want people in a room screaming at each other, saying nasty things and disrespecting each other and all that. That is not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is I want people to throw all the pieces of the puzzle on the table, and I want everyone to get in there and put the beautiful puzzle together.
Collectively, yes.
Collectively, yes. And then, only then, when you all put it together, and you have all the pieces, then is the only time that you can celebrate the masterpiece.
Yeah.
And if you do that, that's how you can grow together. And so many individuals are afraid to do that. And I strongly believe we're often afraid to do that because we have our own inherent things. Like I just said, I think, so many of us have childhood trauma or relationship trauma or something that holds us back because we have an internal fear.
Yeah.
And as a team, as a company, we haven't created a safe culture to allow people to say, hey, I have this puzzle piece here that needs to come out and it needs to be added to this masterpiece. But when we do that, then wow, what amazing things we can grow together.
Yeah, so true, so true. And I love the analogy you used of the puzzle because, I'm an executive coach as well. And so often we hold back, right? We're afraid to question or we're afraid to voice our opinion because we're afraid we'll, tick somebody off or it could cost us our jobs, right? And that shows up in lots of different ways, whether it's asking for a promotion, whether it's asking for time off. Like this comes up in lots of different ways. And internally, we're thinking of it as conflict. We're going to cause conflict because we're asking for X. But then there's also the point that you're bringing up with regards to there's a problem that we need to look at. And if we have a differing opinion, the beauty of it is expressing all the different ideas so that you have an opportunity to really make something a masterpiece as you're describing. And why, Ange? So often people resist this. You can have one person in the room who has a louder voice that people will shy away from because they feel like they're being talked down to or they get triggered because of childhood trauma. But why is this so important? And I know you're super passionate about, creating these cohesive team environments. So can we go a little bit deeper on that? And
I want to say something real quick before we dig deeper.
Yes.
I think that just like I would love to change people's perspective about the word of badass and make it so it's not a cuss word anymore.
Yeah.
I would like to change people's perspective of conflict so the word conflict isn't a cuss word anymore.
Nice.
And I have a mission of that so that conflict is a growth word and it is a team building word and it is a culture building word in the same way.
Nice. I love the reframe on that. Super powerful and super important, right?
Yes.
It's like when we think about giving, sometimes people get nervous about giving negative feedback, right? And it's the same kind of thing. Like it's feedback. That's the most important word. Why are you giving that feedback? Generally, you're giving feedback because you want to help that person grow. You want to help them do better. So it is that pause to reframe. And I love how you shared that. So let's just go a little bit deeper as to
let's do it.
Where that comes from, right? Like we have lots of global examples right now of conflict, given, the economic, but also the political arena that's going on. We see it in organizations. Even if we use an example like the diversity, equity, and inclusion, you have some of these major organizations saying, yep, we're not doing that anymore. We're walking away from it. And you have people scrambling saying, no, we don't want to go backwards. Like that's conflict, right? And so how do you see that playing out and how do we take that deeper? Like, where's that coming from?
I'm trying to remember I listened to a podcast episode recently. It might have been one of Simon Sinek's. And he was talking about, and it wasn't dealing with the DEI challenge and belonging. So I think of DEI and belonging challenge. It was like a United Nations challenge, and I can't remember the exact example, but it really, I think so many of these challenges we have in conflict deal with individuals who are sitting in their worlds talking at each other from their worlds. And if they come into the same room, they oftentimes are still talking at each other from their worlds.
Great point.
And they don't pause to say, "Hey, wait. Let's turn towards each other and let's talk with each other and let's pause. And maybe let's listen to each other and get to know each other. And let's try and understand each other. And let's put aside our own agendas and try and understand each other as humans." At the AGN group, one of our values is seeing humans as humans, and another value is being lifelong learners. And oftentimes the reality is when we start doing those things, then we start to realize the things that we create conflict over are often not as huge of differences as we think they are.
Ooh, well said. Well said.
And so I think that, before I was as educated about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as I am now, I may have fallen into the category of thinking, oh yeah, people should just get hired just based on their ability. Why are we doing these things and skewing things towards favoring one person who may not deserve to be favored? Right? However, I am more educated. I've spent more time learning and understanding humans and cultures and communities. And through my growth in those areas, I understand that the opportunities for us to grow are so much greater. And I believe that as a country, because in our situation as a country, when we pause, if we pause to do that, then the solution will unveil itself. If we don't pause to do that, and if we decide to continue along the path that we're just going to stay in our own zones and talk at each other, then this unhealthy conflict will continue. And that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. So beautifully said. And thank you for that, because I think you're 100% right. We have our own realities. We live in our own realities. And oftentimes for whatever reason, we stay in our reality instead of stepping out and saying, let me try to understand this from somebody else's point of view. And that doesn't mean you have to agree.
Exactly.
Just try to understand it from a different point of view. And that's true with anything, right? But what you learn, like I think back on examples of where I might have thought one way, but then when my reality was expanded and I saw things differently, it was like, oh, okay, now I understand why these individuals or this situation played out the way that it did. Because this happens all the time. So, what you were saying earlier about conflict, normalizing and neutralizing that becomes so important.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that. And I love your passion for the team cohesion and really getting people to step out of their box, their reality, however you want to frame that, into understanding one, how they can grow and learn, but also that it's not that scary when you just listen more and you're with versus at someone.
I actually think it's more scary when you don't listen more.
Oh yeah, agreed.
It's more scary. Yeah. It's more scary when you allow yourself to stay in the box that society has put you in. It's more scary to stay in some boundary that's like, it's a fictitious boundary. Like there's no box around you. You're not in, I can tell you because I was in a hostage situation. There are real life boxes, and most of us are not in real life boxes. We believe we are. It's not true.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not true. So that's scary. So once you are brave enough to jump outside, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll use Mel Robbins' 5-second rule. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just go do it. After you do that a few times, then wow.
Yeah.
It is just so amazing. So I would encourage your listeners to just try it. Like, I don't know.
Be brave. Be badass.
Be brave. Be badass. Tomorrow, just try it on something small.
Yeah.
And then take a few moments to sit back and say, how did that feel? That actually felt great. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try it again. Exactly.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. So I'm cognizant of our time. What would be maybe one thing we've talked about a lot of different things today, and I love everything that you've shared. You're an amazing guest, and thank you. And we could talk for hours. What's one thing you really want our audience to walk away with today?
I want the audience to remember that when they were born, they were only given one opportunity to be themselves. Okay. One opportunity to build a legacy and to make a difference. And I just ask that they make that one opportunity count.
Oh, that's a big ask. And I love that. Well done. So audience, take that to heart, right? Like, how are you going to show up? How are you going to show up and make sure that your gifts that you've brought to the world are seen, heard, recognized? And it doesn't have to be grandiose. It's whatever's authentic for you. Oh, I love that. And Ange, where can people find you? I know you're on all kinds of different social media channels, but where do they find you?
Sure. You can find me at angelagillnelms.com or theagnGroup.com. And please, the new podcast is new. And if you guys don't know the secret, we really thrive off of subscribers. And the best way to follow, it's on all major podcast platforms, but the best way to follow it is on YouTube. So if you'll go to YouTube or however you love to listen to podcasts and follow and it's Badass Leaders Podcast. It's very easy to follow. And that is probably the best way to find me. All of my social media handles are in the show notes of the podcast.
Amazing. Amazing. And we'll have it in our show notes as well. But I always love for our guests to share where people can find you because they may have questions based on our conversation today. So I love when we have this interaction. And audience, thank you for being here today. And as Angela just shared, we do count on you to subscribe, to share, to let people hear these messages because we bring them to you so that hopefully you'll take at least one thing from our conversation today and utilize that somehow in your life or share it with someone who needs to hear it. So Angela, thank you for being here. I'm so grateful to you. Yes. And we'll have to have you back on the show again.
I would love it.
Yes. We'd love to have you back. And audience, thank you for being here today. If you visit the WIL Empowered website, you'll see our free leadership quiz. Make sure you go on, take that because it'll help you understand how you're showing up as a leader. And there's all kinds of goodies that come with that. So please do go on and visit the Women in Leadership Empowered website and take our free leadership quiz. Oh, thank you, everybody. This has been a great show today. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you again. Thank you for joining us for WIL Talk, sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered.
To learn more about our programs, please visit www.willempowered.com. We look forward to seeing you in our community.